Hey everyone, it's Logan here from Landlord Studio, and welcome to episode 6 of the Profitable Rental Podcast. This is where we explore the 6 building blocks of real estate profitability to help you maximize and grow your portfolio. Recently, when we surveyed real estate investors, the overwhelmingly majority agreed that the most important aspect of property management was staying on top of the finances, staying on top of the numbers. So in this week's episode, we're going to be talking to an actual real estate investor and one of our customers who has nailed the financial management of his real estate portfolio. And he's been using Landlord Studio for around about 6 years now, when it was previously called Property Buddy and transitioned into Landlord Studio. So on this episode, we've got Ryan Stotts, and Ryan Stotts is a Texas-based real estate investor with more than 20 years of experience in investing and managing rentals. So welcome, Ryan. It's great to have you with us today, and would love to dive into some of your experience here.
Yeah, I appreciate it, Logan. Great to be here, and thanks for having me.
Yeah, no problem. So wanted to start off with our usual, which is the icebreaker question. Love to hear your favorite quote and why.
Yeah, so actually, this is a quote that I kind of came up with back just shortly after I graduated college. I started working, and it's, don't spend your time standing in someone else's shadow. Instead, spend your time making shadows. And, for me, it was kind of as a forge your own path type of thing. You can spend your time kind of following the lead of others, or you can become a leader and follow your passions and your goals. And so the people that are closest to me know I definitely break the mold sometimes and do crazy stuff and take risks. And so one of the things was to venture off into real estate and try my hand at it. I felt like it was a way to build something great.
Awesome. I love that. And I think some people would probably say the same about me. And sometimes they get a little bit uncomfortable because of the risk, but your risk profile allows you to sort of build that freedom in your life. So love to learn a little bit about where you started. You've obviously been quite successful in the real estate industry and sort of sector and career. So love to know where you started. What was that sort of aha moment when you were getting into it that has led to you to where you are now?
For me, it was, I kind of go along the lines of an organic path. I just bought a place to live in, right? And in order at the time when I was 25 years old, I was young and starting out my career, in order to make the numbers work, I needed a roommate. And so I ended up buying a 3-bedroom condo that had a couple bathrooms, and it went from, hey, if I have one roommate, the numbers work out this way. If I get another roommate, I'm paying less to own the place than I was renting. So I ended up moving shortly after, within about a year and a half, and bought another condo. And all of a sudden I went from a live-in landlord to a long distance landlord, thousands of miles away. And so that's kind of how it started. So it was organic. It got really piqued my interest. I started to look at, other investments, parking spaces, ended up buying a single family home in another market, low income housing. And then, that really got me into quote unquote investing, right? I was like, here I've got some stuff. But really the aha moment was, when I started looking at those investments and breaking them down into how profitable are each one, and really focusing on a market and focusing on a strategy, which for me was long-term buy and hold properties.
It's interesting how people get into real estate, where they sort of buy a property and then bring in flatmates to help sort of subsidize the cost. So I'm currently doing that with a property, and it works quite well to get into the market and can definitely reduce the outgoings, and it's a great sort of strategy to get into it. I think they call it house hacking now, so there's a term for doing it. Wanted to sort of ask you about your portfolio. What do you sort of prefer in your real estate investing strategy? Do you prefer multi-unit, single family homes? And I guess what are you sort of looking for when you're buying new property into your portfolio?
Yeah, so I have a mix. I have condos, previously had parking spots. I've since sold those. Single family homes and a multifamily I'm in as well. I also own, of that portfolio, those are in 4 different states here in the US. and I have most of those under management, but I also self-manage properties in 3 of those 4 states. So kind of a good, mix. I don't know if I necessarily have a preference. I mean, I certainly like the multifamily a lot. Having enough single families, it's also got some benefits as well. The condos are very easy. They're places I used to live. And so every, investment has its own pros and cons. And certainly people have their different strategies. But for me, when I'm looking at new properties, it's really about, options. So upon the acquisition is really where you're going to make your money, no matter what the outcome is. If you end up, flipping it or buying and holding it long term, or maybe doing a little fix up and selling it to another investor, there's a lot of different ways that you can do that. But it comes down to the math and the return on investment, the income. And so if it's a solid property, the numbers work out, then, I know that I'll have some options down the road.
Yeah, and we sort of talked about this offline, about the importance of focus and sort of making sure that as you journey along your real estate journey, focusing down into the area that you either started in or started having success in. How important has that been for your journey in terms of picking the right property or a very specific type of property?
Yeah, again, for me, it's been mainly, long-term buy and hold, right? And so, along that path, as you start to talk to people and investors or people that maybe even don't have properties, but they hear about, hey, I heard Airbnbs are great, or, parking spaces, or storage units, or commercial. There's a lot of different ways, and I may get into some of those in the future as well. But I think that, there are opportunities in any market that you want to look at. You can be a very successful storage unit owner. You can be a very successful, commercial unit owner. You can obviously be successful in single family homes and residential. But if you're, too spread out, or, you have success in one or more clearly, failure in one or two, and that starts to take a toll, that can certainly take down your business. So I think focusing on one, getting really good at, and just, rinse and repeat has been a successful strategy for me.
Yeah, I heard this quote from a billionaire once who was being interviewed, and they always ask, what's the secret to the wealth or to your wealth? And he basically said, spending 40 years on this single business. And it's just reiterating on the same thing again and again and again, just helps you get better and better. I had a question about sort of portfolio size as well, and at what sort of level does it take to become a full-time landlord, being able to rely solely on the income of your portfolio? From your experience, what's that sort of level or portfolio size that you need to sort of get to before you can shift away from being in a full-time job?
Yeah, so I think that depends on the portfolio and the type of units. So one of the things that I thought about was that, if you look at investor A, right, that has, let's say, 100 units, but they're making, $100 per unit. That's $10,000 in income per month, right? If your net profit is 100 per unit. The same investor, or a separate investor, investor B, could have, 20 units, but if they're making $500 a unit, that's the same $10,000 a month, right? So I think that, from my perspective, I came from corporate America. I had, good W-2, high earning position, and I went to, kind of flip the script, if you will, and went from high income to low income, went from high expenses or higher expenses to low expenses, in order to give myself the ability to kind of grind through it and get to the point that the level where you can make it work. And I think that, that number ends up being somewhere in the 10, 15, 20 range, probably more 15, 20. And you can kind of start to do that as long as you've got good cash flow, and as long as you have good processes and good management in place, so your profits are there.
So for somebody sort of getting into the space of real estate investing right at the start, from your perspective, what are some of the risks or main risks of real estate investing that they should be wary of and look out for?
Yeah, these are a lot of risks, right? I mean, if you're not risk averse, or if you are risk averse, certainly one of those things you would want to consider. But it's all about management of those risks, right? So I think the big thing is just to have a plan, have a strategy. Again, I kind of talked about earlier exit plans and options. So if you go into it with one option and that doesn't work out, that investment might not be profitable or might not work out for you. But if you have different ways or avenues to move forward, then when those challenges come, you can pivot or shift accordingly. And then just having a really solid team in place, and have patience, because issues are going to come up, and things are going to arise. And as long as you can kind of work through it, and you have the right team in place and people to support you, you can find solutions.
When you start to dive into some of those risks, obviously they're spread across the spectrum, whether it's sort of personnel risks or tenant risks. In terms of sort of financial management, because I think this is a key part of being successful in real estate, what sort of role do you think financial management plays in sort of mitigating a lot of those other risks and sort of the risk overall for becoming successful?
Yeah, I think running the numbers up front, first of all, going back to kind of having a plan. But as if you have a good software system and you're tracking the numbers day to day to week, then you're going to have a plan or a way to kind of work through the challenges that present themselves. So I think that's the biggest way. And just running your reports, having visibility, so when things start to come up, you can figure out what your repair costs are on property A and B, and look at what that looks like in general. And as you continue to invest moving forward, you can get more dialed in with your upfront numbers, because you know what the reality of the situation is. I heard on one of your other podcasts, plan for more, right? So you can plan, the best laid plans are there until other things happen, then all of a sudden you've got to kind of figure it out, right?
So sort of drilling down into some of the processes, particularly around that financial management aspect, day to day or week to week, what are some of the sort of financial reports that you're running in Landlord Studio, or the numbers that you're checking to make sure that you are on top of things and progressing well going forward?
Yeah, so it's a tricky question, because I think that, for me, profit and loss statements, the ledgers month to month, they kind of build up to, your end of the year tax, and you look at, your overall profit or loss for that property. And just because an investment, I think it's important to kind of know as an investor or future investor, just because an investment maybe doesn't have a good year doesn't mean it's not a good long-term investment, for several reasons. One, you could have great years after that. And two, there's so many factors in real estate that are working in your favor, right? So you've got not only cash flow, which is super important, number one in my book, but you've also got appreciation, you've got depreciation, the tax benefits, and then you've got, depending on if you're carrying a note, several of my properties are owned outright, so that makes the cash flow a lot better. But if you are carrying notes, which I have on some of them, then you've got the principal reduction. So, even though maybe the numbers aren't so great that year, you've got other factors in your direction that are making the investment profitable or worthwhile in the long term.
I think that's quite key, actually, because not every year is going to be positive or as good as the last or previous. I think that comes back to that sort of key insight of how long-term real estate investing and holding is really the best way of maximizing success with it, and not sort of getting too upset or unstable when things don't go well.
Well, and I think that's what'll tend to scare off some people who maybe, fell into it, right? So I picked up through a family member a property, or I decided to get a rental, or I moved and I turned my house into a rental. A lot of people are very scared about what that means, right? I got to be a landlord. I've got to take phone calls at midnight about toilets breaking, or I got to go fix it, or whatever. As long as you set the right systems in place, you won't have to do that, because I can raise my hand and tell you I've never taken a phone call after midnight from a tenant or a text message. And if I needed to, I would be there, certainly. But also just picking the right people. And then, they have a bad experience, right? And they get scared off and they say, oh, well, this isn't good. This doesn't work. That's, I don't believe the stories about, successful self-management or successful management with a team. And certainly I think that, a bad experience can put a bad taste in your mouth, but if you grind through it, or if you have the right mindset, right, you can approach it in that next 3 or 4 years, that property could be buzzing for you and making extra money for you, and continuing to push your portfolio forward.
successes and failures of your journey or other people's journeys that you've seen, what are some of the things that you've seen over the years of, either you're in your own portfolio or other people's portfolios?
Well, never giving up. So like, for example, the first, true investment, a house that I had never lived in, I bought, and it was a fixer up type thing, buy and hold long term, but there was some rehab. And during that process, and it was hard money, so there was a lot of moving parts and pieces, but it got broken into, and a bunch of items were stolen. Had an insurance claim. Luckily, I had insurance, but I'm sure a lot of people would have been scared out of the market, been thinking, well, this isn't, the right thing for me. And I just had, a goal and a plan that I was going to figure this out and make it work. And so I just kept kind of moving the ball forward, and I ended up actually holding that property for 13 or 14 years. I just sold it a few months ago, and it worked out great. So, and it's one of those things that, there's going to be failures, there's going to be hurdles, and you're just going to kind of have to keep pushing forward.
Yeah, I like that. I think insurance is quite important because I've heard some horror stories, whether they're just, small or major things. It's always good to be protected around that and just ensuring that you've got all that sorted.
We could do a whole nother podcast on that.
Yeah, exactly. And finally, a bit of a shameless plug. How's Landlord Studio helped you over the years, and what are some of the sort of features that you will typically use on a day-to-day, week-to-week basis?
Landlord Studio, I searched out basically looking for a solution to solve one big problem, which was tax reporting for me. It was the biggest pain point that I had at that point in my real estate investing career. And it's done that in an excellent way in terms of the reporting capabilities. And just when it comes to tax time, provide the numbers and the reports and the data that I need to streamline that process. Along with that, just on the day-to-day or month-to-month, the ability to slice and dice the data. So pick, I'm interested in this information. How do I go in there and figure it out? I've got enough information and properties there to say, well, I want to look at utility costs for this period of time, or I want to look at, maintenance costs, or all those things together. And you can, slice and dice the data accordingly. That ability gives you a lot of leverage and a lot of information at your fingertips within, a couple clicks.
Amazing. And I guess the last sort of question is any advice for new real estate investors or existing real estate investors looking to grow?
Yeah, I think, don't give up. And certainly, like I said, there's going to be challenges, and also just be willing to get creative and have a really solid team, right? So people that I work with, whether it be, CPA, property management, insurance, I'm always trying to find team members that fit in line with the mindset that I have in terms of, openness, creativity, being willing to work through situations. And if you build a solid team, you can certainly get through anything that comes your way.
Well, absolute privilege to have you on here today, Ryan, and it's always good to catch up and hear how your journey is going. So, and no doubt you'll be able to take some wisdom from Ryan and apply it to your real estate business. And so if you've liked this episode, give it a like, give it a share, subscribe to the channel for more episodes that are coming, and follow us on social media as well. Look for Landlord Studio on all platforms, and this podcast will go out on those social channels. So be sure to listen to it and take some of those nuggets of wisdom and advice. And also stay tuned for episode 7 of the Profitable Rental Podcast. It's going to be a really good one. So till next time, appreciate it, Ryan, and have a great week.
Thanks, Logan. It was great. Appreciate you.